February 24th, 2022, life as Ukrainians knew it comes to an end. A full-scale invasion by land, sea, and air as Russian troops pour into Ukraine. World leaders immediately levy sanctions on Russia.
The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine. Without provocation, without justification, without necessity, this is a premeditated attack.
More than 70,000 Russian troops try to encircle the capital, Kyiv, but the advance bogs down quickly. Russian troops are poorly trained, led, equipped, and very poorly motivated. They encounter fierce resistance.
Here, you can see that they are taking the sand out of the children's playground and using them to make sandbags with.
If we don't stop them now, my grandchildren must fight in maybe 20 years later. We must stop this.
As the invasion bogs down in late spring, Russia resorts to long-range missile strikes, causing thousands of civilian casualties and billions in property damage. Hospitals, homes, and schools are often the targets.
This lady behind me, his name is Olga, and her home was destroyed by a very large missile. Blew up all the houses in this area. It's just a residential district. There's no military targets here or anything. She's a Russian speaker. She's lived in this house all her life, and she has no plans, no money to be able to go anywhere else. So she's just sort of sifting through the rubble at this point, trying to decide what to do next.
By April, it's clear the Ukrainians will hold Kyiv, and Russia pulls back to refocus their combat power in the east. After the withdrawal, liberated areas reveal horrific Russian war crimes and human rights abuses. Russia captures Mariupol in May after 4 months of costly fighting. Thousands die in the process, and the city is reduced to ruin. As Russian cruise missiles, cluster munitions, and thermobaric weapons fall, Ukrainian farmers cannot ship their grain to market, causing another humanitarian crisis. Wheat supplies plummet, causing a global shortage. Concerns about fighting at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant dominate the summer airwaves as Russia holds the facility hostage and endangers its employees.
What's at stake is the nuclear safety and security of the biggest nuclear power plant in the European continent.
Ukraine launches a counteroffensive in September. They quickly liberate over 600,000 square kilometers in the north, and soldiers say donated American equipment makes the difference.
One of our soldiers with the technology, it's stronger than maybe 10 or 20 soldiers from Russia. This helps us to win.
Ukrainians also get creative with off-the-shelf technology, using standard camera drones to take out hundreds of Russian tanks. Suffering heavy losses, Putin orders the first military mobilization since World War II. More than 1 million Russian men flee to avoid conscription. September, Russia annexes 4 Ukrainian oblasts. The Crimean Bridge is bombed days later. Soon afterward, the Ukrainian army retakes Kherson, handing the Russians their worst defeat yet and sparking street celebrations. These Christians moved in to pray for their city.
I can't even express what I'm feeling. It's a happiness, and for me, it's a mountain that was impossible to be moved, but it was moved only by God.
Russia targets critical infrastructure as winter approaches, using the cold as a weapon. Daily rocket attacks leave many Ukrainian villages without electricity, water, or heat. Battle lines harden as President Zelensky requests more aid because his army is firing more artillery in a month than most countries acquire in a year. Operation Blessing and Orphan's Promise have been assisting Ukrainian Christians since the beginning, providing desperately needed help to the frontline areas and displaced families across the country.
And I see that these people who are still be here, this church, who are serve people here, they fighting for me too. It's like another level of soldiers.
1 year after the invasion, Russia has yet to realize any of its strategic goals, and escalation seems increasingly likely as NATO deploys more troops to their eastern border. A new Russian offensive with up to 500,000 troops hopes to defeat the Ukrainians before they can field promised tanks and long-range weaponry. But Ukraine now has a 1 million-man army and is better prepared and equipped. Experts say the war could last years, but whether Ukraine gets the weapons it needs in the next few months could make all the difference. From Ukraine, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News. Hey, folks, well, look at here. I'm back in Kyiv, and it's the 1-year anniversary of the invasion. As a matter of fact, just days before the invasion started, I was staying in the hotel that's right back over my shoulder over there, the Kyiv Hotel. But on the actual day of the invasion, 1 year ago, I was staying just down the street that direction at the Hilton Hotel. And we got word that the invasion had started, that there were tanks coming across the border, and it was very dicey. We weren't sure what was going on. Everybody was trying to get out. There were air raid sirens here in Maidan Square, and there were big traffic jams going out toward the west, as people were trying to flee to Poland. Many people left the city. A lot of men were getting their families out, their wives and children, and men themselves are not able to leave because they might be needed. And so there was a rule or a law put in place that kept them from leaving. What we're seeing now, a year later, is that there are more people in Kyiv than there were to begin with, because people have come back and people have come here from the east where the Russians are in control. And what I can see from my window here is that there are a lot of media outlets that are preparing for today's commemoration of the 1-year anniversary. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 news crews down there in the square with their cameras. Maybe you can see that if you look down this way, back that direction. You see all those news crews down there. This is Maidan Square. This is where the 2014 protests took place, and there were about 100, they call them the Heavenly 100, protesters that were murdered just back behind me on that hillside right there, as that road that goes up towards the presidential area. There was a barricade there, and there were some pro-Soviet, pro-Russian, if not actual Russian soldiers who opened fire on the crowd, and snipers, actually, that were just killing people. And I was here just after that happened in 2014. So it's interesting to watch the history of Ukraine unfold. And the only thing that I'll say, look, there's so much rancor and partisanship over helping Ukraine, over sending aid here, military aid. And I'm not going to deny that, maybe America doesn't need to be supplying the whole world with weapons. But at the same time, I think what it really comes down to here in Ukraine is just simply this. Russia invaded a sovereign country, its neighbor, unjustly, with no justification whatsoever. And we should stand against that. We should do what we can to assist Ukraine in destroying this threat so that the Russians will not be a threat for a long time. That's a difficult choice to make. It's expensive, and it means upping the ante with Russia. But what's the other alternative? What's our alternative? Our alternative is to let Russia steamroll over a sovereign country to its west and maybe keep going. It's to give Russia what it wants. And if you learned anything from grade school like I did, it's that you can never allow a bully to be a bully. You have to stand up to a bully as soon as you identify him. Otherwise, he will just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And that's exactly what's happening here. If we don't help Ukraine do what they need to stop Russia, then that bully will continue to bully the world. And just because they have nuclear weapons, just because they have a big army or had a big army, is not justification for allowing them to do what they have done. It's very often true in life that when you have a hard decision to make, And you can make one of two decisions: to do this or that, A or B. And one of the two is the more difficult, the more risky. Very often, that is the right decision. The more risky decision is the right one. The more difficult to make is the right one. And I think that holds true here in Ukraine. And I don't care which party is in power in the United States. There are some people that are so wedded to that tribal instinct to be against whatever the Democrats do or against whatever the Republicans do. You know what? Screw all that. Maybe it's that I've lived outside the United States long enough that I'm not going to play that game anymore. I am as opposed to the Democratic Party and its agenda. I'm as opposed to the World Economic Forum and its agenda. I'm as opposed to globalism and its agenda as anyone. But right is right and wrong is wrong. And we ought to be men and women enough to say so when we see a wrong being committed. And the fact that it might include danger to ourselves, the fact that it might actually include risk or even cost to ourselves to stand up for what's right, does not mean that we don't have a duty to stand for what's right. If you see an injustice taking place, you have to stand against that injustice. That's just all there is to it. If you're a good person. If you're so tribal, if you're so, partisan that you literally cannot denounce a dictator destroying another country, unjustly invading another country, if you can't stand against that just because of your politics, well, I feel sorry for you, because that is not a good way to live your life. So I'm going to continue to stand for Ukraine. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean we need to give them all our money. There are good ways to help Ukraine, and there are probably not so good ways to help Ukraine. There are ways that will, if we continue to pour so many billions of dollars into this country in armaments, those armaments may very well be shooting back at us at some point. If we continue to pour so much money into this country, that money may very well create dependencies here, like it did in Afghanistan, and actually foment corruption. The corruption that was actually declining precipitously before the war started. So we don't want to create corruption. We don't want to create dependency. But at the same time, we cannot allow Russia to have its way with Ukraine, because if we do, we're enabling a bully, and that makes us culpable. So that's my sermon for today. I'm going to be reporting on the 1-year anniversary on Newsmax and CBN today and other outlets. So stay tuned. We'll see you.